Jewish Channel's Week in Review. Sanctions against Iran get passed in Congress. What will they do about Iran's nuclear program? The nominee to be a third Jewish justice on the Supreme Court gets asked about Christmas, and an Israeli judge cruising around Manhattan for the cause of an imprisoned soldier, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world on this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. Sanctions against Iran were passed by overwhelming majorities in the U.S. Congress last week. The sanctions were near the top of the agenda of many Jewish organizations for years. In a Senate vote of 99-0 and a House vote of 408-8, the bill now just awaits the signature of President Barack Obama to become law. The sanctions are meant to keep Iran from developing nuclear weaponry and would penalize companies that assist Iran's energy sector. It would bar U.S. banks from engaging in deals with banks that do business with Iran's Revolutionary Guard or assisting Iran's nuclear program. In the area of improving human rights in Iran, the sanctions would bar companies from obtaining contracts for work with the U.S. government if they provide Iran with technology to restrict communications. And individual Iranians found to have been involved in human rights violations would be barred from receiving visas for travel to the U.S. and potentially be subject to having their assets in the U.S. seized. With Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu set to visit the White House next week, these sanctions will frame some of the discussion on Iran. In other Israel news, last week saw the 4th anniversary of the imprisonment of Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, who is being held in Gaza without international monitoring. Shalit became a renewed topic of discussion lately as a result of the Israeli Defense Forces raid on a ship bringing humanitarian aid to Gaza, in which 9 activists were killed. The Netanyahu administration and some members of the Jewish community here in the United States saw the event as an appropriate time to highlight the treatment of Shalit. Last week, a right-leaning group of Jewish leaders created a seaborne voyage of their own in response, and Rebecca Honig-Friedman was there.
It's been 4 years since the capture of Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, and the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations is marking the occasion with a boat ride that they're calling the Real Freedom Flotilla. Organized in just 3 days, the flotilla, which consisted of 2 ferry-sized yachts donated for the event and at least 1 private boat in tow, was designed as both a call to free Gilad Shalit and as a response to the controversy over the Israeli Navy's raid of a Turkish flotilla carrying humanitarian aid to Gaza last month, which left 9 activists dead and 2 Israeli soldiers injured.
There are those who use the name Freedom Flotilla for propaganda purposes, to violate freedom, to support terrorist entities, to deny Israel the right to defend its citizens. This is the true Freedom Flotilla addressing the real siege in Gaza, which is not against the people of Gaza, but against Gilad Shalit.
Carrying a few hundred Jewish leaders and ordinary citizens of all ages, the boats sailed up the East River, past the Statue of Liberty, New York's most prominent symbol of freedom, and past the United Nations, a target of the flotilla's message. To hear more from Jewish and Christian leaders aboard this Freedom Flotilla, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Rebecca. Now on to the left side of the Jewish community. 2 weeks ago, we hosted J Street President Jeremy Ben-Ami for our Newsmaker segment. That night, he had a dialogue with the Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg, from which Christian Needon files this report.
The relationship between Israel and America is a topic growing more important with next week's visit to the White House by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And the relationship between the two countries was the topic of this gathering 2 weeks ago, where J Street founder Jeremy Ben-Ami was at the New York Society for Ethical Culture for a public discussion with Atlantic correspondent Jeffrey Goldberg titled Israel and America in the 21st Century. Defining the challenge for American Jews, Ben-Ami recalled a recent conversation he had with former Labor Party leader Ami Ayalon.
And he talked about how for so many years the Zionist request of Americans was to give money. Then the Zionist request was make aliyah. Then the Zionist plea was, well, at least come and visit and spend your tourist dollars, right? But today he's saying that the Zionist imperative is to tell Israel the truth, to hold up that mirror to Israel so that it can see for itself what is happening, because the trends are not good.
For Goldberg, the question about liberal Zionism was whether it's even possible at this point in time.
Today, there are serious arguments being made from the left that one cannot possibly be a liberal and be a Zionist, and they point to, among other obvious signs, the presence of an Avigdor Lieberman in the Israeli cabinet, in the foreign ministry. They point to 43 years of occupation and almost as many years of settlement, and the list goes on. So the question is the question is not, did liberal Zionism ever exist? The question is, can it still exist?
Hear what else Goldberg and Ben Ami were talking about on the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. Nominee to the Supreme Court, Elena Kagan, was going through the Senate confirmation hearings this week. In an effort to avoid controversy, nominees at these hearings are known for abstaining from discussion of constitutional interpretation, which leads to a lighter discussion of the nominee's personal history. Since Kagan is Jewish, that light discussion contained one humorous bit of dialogue, as you'll see in this clip.
Christmas Day bomber, where are you at on Christmas Day?
Senator Graham, that is an undecided legal issue, which, I suppose I should ask exactly what you mean by that. I'm assuming that the question you mean is whether a person who was apprehended in the United States is...
No, I just asked you where you're at on Christmas.
You know, like all Jews, I was probably at a Chinese restaurant.
Great answer. Great answer.
You know, I could almost see that one coming, and I thought,
Me too. So you were celebrating Hanukkah.
Senator Schumer explained this to me earlier.
Yeah, he did.
If I might, no other restaurants are open.
Right. You were with your family on Christmas Day at a Chinese restaurant. Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's great. That's what Hanukkah and Christmas is all about.
Moving on to another topic regarding the Israeli Supreme Court, a story we discussed last week, the case of school segregation between Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews in the Israeli town of Emmanuel, which has new developments this week. A deal was struck between the Israeli Supreme Court and leading rabbis of both the Ashkenazi and Sephardi ultra-Orthodox communities. According to the terms of the deal, both Ashkenazi and Sephardi students will return to school for the last 3 days of the school year, where they will study, quote, the love of Israel together. Over the course of the summer, a long-term solution will be prepared and presented to the court by August 25th. To discuss this deal and other Orthodox issues that have been making headlines lately, we're bringing a leading commentator on the community in studio for this week's Newsmaker segment. Rabbi Gil Student is the managing editor of the Orthodox Union's book publishing arm, the OU Press, and edits the leading blog on Orthodox issues, Hirhurim. All right, Gil, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure to be here.
So let's start with this sentencing in the Rubashkin case, where he was sentenced to 27 years in prison. You disagree or agree with that sentence?
Well, look, I'm not a legal expert. It seems like a lot, but from what I've been seeing in the media, sentencing varies greatly, and that's really one of the injustices of this country that we need to work on, is that sentencing should be equal and should be just. In this particular case, I don't really know whether it's out of whack, but it just seems to me personally, on an individual level, seems pretty high.
And in the Orthodox community as a whole, or certainly in the ultra-Orthodox community here in the United States, we're seeing a lot of protests about this sentencing and a lot of protests about the prosecution in general. What do you sense?
I'm uncomfortable about that. There is room to protest because it could help for a pardon in the future, and I see value in that. But it's also, you have to remember that not long ago, a Hasidic Rebbe was convicted, and he's in jail now for money laundering. And at that point, there was a revival of, we need to teach business ethics to the community. We need to be telling people that you have to follow the laws, including financial. A financial crime is a crime. And we need to emphasize that, and I think that's getting lost. It's been lost for a while. And we need to re-emphasize that and reteach that, and we need to be clear. A financial crime is a crime, and from everything I've read and I've seen, there have been financial crimes committed here. And we need to be emphasizing to our kids and to ourselves and to the adults that that is a crime, and that there are lines you cannot break.
More of this interview with Gil Student is available on the full broadcast version of the Week in Review. That's all for this week. For more news and analysis from the Jewish Channel during the week, please check out our blog at newsdesk.tjctv.com. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. IO Optimum Cable Channel 291, Time Warner Cable Channel 528, RCN Channel 268, Verizon Fios Channel 900, and Cox Cable Channel 1. For more information, visit tjctv.com.